Hey.
We have to stop for a lot of these things, these big wide loads travelling up here.
Hello again, good people. And we had to get out of the way of a number of those 8.5 metre wide trucks along the road, and it reiterates how important having a two-way radio is, because the pilots can talk to you, the truck drivers can talk to you, and you can accommodate each other on the road. And anybody who's towing a caravan should be mandatory, I reckon, to have a two-way radio with your call signs on your van for safety's sake. So this is Newman. We didn't stay long in Newman. It's a mining town. It's interesting in itself, but not a lot of things for tourists to do really. So we did what we could, stayed a couple of days, and then we moved on. And this is Mount Robinson, which is a nice little free camp north of Newman, before you get to the Oski Roadhouse. It's got a nice little gorge, which is quite a tough walk. It's not a big gorge, but it's rocky, and there's some scrambling and some pools and things, and it's quite pretty. So that was nice. So I put the drone up, and we only stayed there the night before we carried on to Karajini. And then there's Karajini. I don't know what you can say about that. If you haven't been, for God's sake, save up your pennies and go, because this is a spot that is so spectacular. These gorges, there's half a dozen of these gorges, and they're huge. This is Dale's Gorge. Circular pool there is closed at the moment, unfortunately, but it's just such a gorgeous place. And these gorges, you can walk into them. There's scrambling and climbing, and some of them are much harder than others. But every little bit of effort is worth it. You'll be rewarded with scenes, you'll be rewarded with places to swim, and it's just a gorgeous and very special place. This is the campground where we stayed. You aren't actually supposed to fly drones around here, but a young fella next to me had a drone and he was having some problems with it, so I got my drone out so that we could make some adjustments to his. And of course I had to press the record button. And so that's the campground. It's a deep water site, so it's fairly cheap. I think $12 or $15 a night or something like that. No power and water, but there's toilets. And we're not here in peak season, so there's plenty of room at the camp. You've got 10 metres between you and the neighbour, and it's just a really nice camp, typical of deep ore sites around Western Australia, really. But the highlight of the whole thing is these gorges, and you just can't imagine how beautiful they are. Dale's Gorge, particularly spectacular. And at the end of Dale's Gorge is Fortescue Falls and Fern Pool. We went there every afternoon for a swim. It's a bit of a climb down some steps to get there, but what a beautiful spot. Plunge in there at the end of the day.
Behind the waterfall in Fern Pool, Karajini. Oh look, there's a little nymph. In you go. So we're at the spa pool of Hammersley Gorge. There's the sea monkeys.
So I think Hammersley Gorge is probably the prettiest with the most striking rock formations, but this one, Hancock Gorge, is certainly the most challenging and the most stunning gorge because of its narrow places to get through, and it can be dark, and there's the old spider walk, which they don't encourage you to do, but there's pictures here of Belinda doing the spider walk, and several people that came through after us did the spider walk, where you spread out on either side of the wall and climb along the wall, which is the way everybody used to do it. But there was a few accidents, people fall and face plant into the rocks, which is not a really good thing to do. So yes, you can see from these pictures that Hancock Gorge is really the one that's the standout as far as spectacular goes. Yeah, it's a really fascinating place, and you'll really enjoy it when you get there.
I don't know whether you'll be able to slide there.
Hey?
I don't know whether you'll be able to slide there, but never mind. Yeah. Here she goes. We're in Hancock Gorge. In the end pool, I think. Don't think you can go any further. Carl? We're in Hancock Gorge, beyond the spider walk. Huh?
You would have taken pictures of me by the waterfall.
Yeah.
That's like the wall.
Yes, isn't it?
And this is Weeno Gorge. Weeno is probably the easiest gorge. It's got some steps down at one end and a bit of a scrambly climb at the other. It's a fairly wide gorge, pretty in its own way. It's got a nice pool that you can have a swim in. Well, it could when we were there. I suppose there's times when there's not much water in it, but it's quite a nice little gorge. And the last one on this video from here, there's another couple of knocks and Karamina or something like that it's called, that we didn't do. And it's just another good reason to go back to Karajini, I reckon, just to go and have a look at those couple of gorges. And this is Millstream. This is an old station. I was here 40 odd years ago, and it's a wonderful spot. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see an awful lot of it. We got there in the afternoon. We came the back road, which was fairly slow and rough, and that took some time. But we set up camp and just sort of wandered around and had a look at the old homestead and stuff. It used to be a station when I was here, and then it was taken over as a water supply for Karajini. And then it rained overnight, and you can see here, I put my drone up over the river, and it's red, and it's running, and it's pretty angry. And so the camp host came and he said, look, the river's up to 60 centimetres. If you want to get out any time before the weekend, and this was sort of a Wednesday night, then we suggest you go now, because we're expecting it to be up at about 1.5 metres by midnight. So we packed up, and when we got to the river, it was 80 centimetres deep. So we got across. We didn't quite have a houseboat. We got a little bit of water into the bottom step of the van. We didn't float away, although the river was fairly surging, and it was quite a bit of excitement. And when we drove in, it was dry. There was no water anywhere. So it's such a huge catchment for the Fortescue River that water just comes up quickly, and you need to be prepared. 600.
Okay, so you can do it.
About 800 mil. Up to the underside of the van.
It's, yeah, close. But another one.
So having been chased out of Millstream, we went to Point Sampson, and this is actually dampier because it's down near Karajini, and we had a look around that neck of the woods, and then Roburn, which is an Aboriginal community now, and it's a pretty fascinating sort of a spot. And then there's Cossack as well. So Cossacks was sort of the original port up that way, and it's still got some old buildings and museum and that sort of thing. So that's quite a nice historic old town. Now here's a fun fact you didn't know. I used to work in Port Hedland when I was a young fella, and this is the Pier Hotel, which we used to frequent. Now, I was underage, so I used to drink lemon squash, of course. And it looks like in the last 40 years, they haven't spent a penny on this place. But we went in and had a beer, and that was quite interesting. And I remember well the fights and the drunken nights and all those sorts of things. Wonderful place. But this is Port Hedland. Again, an industrial town like Newman, much bigger than when I was there, and not a lot to attract a tourist really. You can do some tours around the mines or the processing plants and that sort of thing. So that's it for us for this one. The next one's going to be interesting. I can take you to all the fishing spots where I didn't catch a fish, which is all the fishing spots. See you then. Bye-bye.